Fantastic. Well, it is 9:01.
11.
Is it 9:01?
It's 11 here in Texas time.
Oh, it's
We're central.
I'm on Pacific time. I was looking at the
He's still.
computer. It is 11 a.m. 12 Eastern for our guests out there. So, everybody, why don't we go ahead and get this show kicked off?
I love how I called it Texas time.
Texas
Instead of
time. It's not
Central.
Central time. It
Nope,
is Texas
it's
time.
Texas time.
Welcome, everybody, to Converge PoE. This is Tyler Andrews. Most of you know me as the head nerd and host of Converge PoE, where we cover all the topics you want to know about with PoE. We cover a wide range of things that are fun and exciting. So, and as always, I have my lovely co-host, Miss Maria Medell.
Hi, everyone. So this week we're going to just dispense with the bio because our guest is an up-and-coming creator that you can find on YouTube, Patreon, and Twitter at thehookup.com or thesmarthomehookup.com is the website. The man behind all of this is Rob Tait. He's with us today, and The Hookup is a channel that's dedicated to all the latest smart home gadgets and technology. On his channel, you can find videos on product reviews, tutorials, and even hardware choices. So welcome to the show today, Rob.
Excellent. Oh, you know what? We didn't do the video. We got to do the intro video.
Yes.
We jumped through it. We're a little bit disorganized today. So
Been
let me
that
get
kind
to
of
the
a morning
video and we'll
here.
bring Rob right on. Rob, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. I'm going to learn some stuff about PoE, you all right?
Yes.
Always.
Well, we're
Or am I
all
gonna keep
learning.
you?
We're getting back and forth.
Exactly.
Well, fantastic. Well, Rob, we're going to kind of warm up the audience, give everybody time to get their questions in. So, guys, home automation questions, whatever you want to know about, get in there and start asking us questions. Let us know what you'd like to know about. You got a home automation expert right here with you today. He'll answer questions. And you got your PoE experts, as always, willing to answer any questions. So, Rob, give everybody time to start putting their questions in. Would you mind giving us the summary of the video you did? It was only a week ago, talking about your home network. So everybody out there, Rob is doing this great series on building a home network. Obviously, yeah, I'm not surprised. He picked a PoE network, and he gives a great explanation about PoE and the home network. So. Rob, give us maybe just a 2-minute summary of what that video is, and we'll throw the link up here so everybody can see where that's at.
Sure. Well, in home automation, there's really a few different camps of types of devices, right? You've got your proprietary protocols like Zigbee and Z-Wave that are RF. They run on similar spectrums to Wi-Fi, and then you've got actual Wi-Fi. And the problem and the main complaint that people have with running their home automation off of Wi-Fi is that they don't want to bog down their network. They don't want to cause their computers to get less bandwidth by having all of these smart home devices. And that's a mildly valid concern if you have older network equipment. But most of the newer stuff, especially all the mesh network stuff that's out there now, like the Google Wi-Fi type stuff, it's not really a big deal. You can have hundreds of devices on your network without running into any problems. But what is a really valid concern is when you start putting all of these IoT devices on your home network, you don't know who's really in control of those devices. When you have a cloud device, it's running firmware on it that is controlled by another company, and that company may or may not have good intentions. And even if they do have good intentions, it's possible that they can't execute those good intentions very well, and they will open up a security hole whereby somebody can penetrate your network, even though you may have taken all the precautions that you thought were necessary, but they can penetrate your network by penetrating some cloud services network. And so in this network overhaul that I'm doing, it's got a bunch of different parts to it. But one of the main things and one of the main differences between the network that I'm going to create and the network that I had before, which was a Google Wi-Fi system, is separation, right? separation between devices, where you've got your main computer and your laptops and your tablets and those things that you want to have sort of unrestricted access to your network. And then you've got cloud devices, ones that are running software that you're not in control of, your Amazon Echo devices. You use the TUYA network, if you use Philips Hue and those types of things, those are connecting out to some cloud. And so you want to keep those devices sort of segregated on your network. And then another type that I have on my network, which is only locally controlled stuff, right? And so, if you flash custom firmware, that stuff doesn't ever need to communicate with the internet. It's only local. And so you can unplug your internet connection and it's going to work just fine forever. And so that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing is security cameras. And those are right now a big PoE thing that I have. And those security cameras are a lot like the internal network, except for even more, because security cameras really don't need to talk to anybody or anything. They run their own little video server on them. And so you can block all traffic completely from those video cameras and only look at them. And they don't need to come and talk to anybody else. And so you can completely lock them.
That's cool. So I'm getting four things, guys, that Rob is really focusing on. And correct me if I'm wrong. Going backward, you got the security cameras. You've got you've got the custom products that are on a network that don't need to be talking to the outside. Cloud-based services. And then your network stuff that most people are familiar with, like your computer, your laptop, what you're doing, right, that carries, frankly, a lot of your proprietary information on it.
Yes.
And so, and if I'm hearing the reasoning right, and I like to do this because it helps me understand it better, obviously you want to have on your own network the proprietary stuff. You're talking to your bank, you're talking to your credit cards on your stuff. You don't want the same cloud-based services, which are TUYA, Echo, Amazon, Google, all looking at that same network. So you keep those separate. And then you've got your internal products, and those are like the things that aren't talking to aren't talking to an outside network, and you don't want people to even have access to get to them from the outside.
Right, because you're writing your own firmware for those, and so you don't know necessarily if you're the best at it and you've thought of all the security things. But one of the ways to keep yourself safe is just don't let him talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Keep them separate from the internet completely.
That is very good. Okay, and then you got your security cameras. Now I'm curious, Rob, are you doing cloud services for your security cameras? Like Amcrest and Nest, they'll all store all your information in the cloud. You're saying you don't. You store it locally on the camera, or do you store it locally in it like an NVR?
On an NVR, yeah. I'm using Blue Iris as an NVR. I do have the Unify Cloud Key Gen 2 Plus also. So that only works with Unify cameras, which are decent. But I've got a video coming out in a few weeks that you'll see you can do a lot better for the price. Unify is a little bit like Apple in the sense that you pay for the name and you pay for the fact that it all just works together, right? So if you buy Unify stuff that it's gonna mesh together perfectly and everything's gonna be able to look at everything else and pick up everything else, but you pay a little bit of a premium for that. And so if you don't want to pay a premium for it, there are companies out there that are doing amazing cameras for pretty cheap prices, $50 for a 6 megapixel camera.
Can you share? Can you give our audience, all these people out there, any sneak previews, or are you going to hold out for it?
Sure. I got 8 camera brands between about $50 and $150, and I tested them all. And by far, Reolink came out on top. I mean, like as far as clarity goes, I did a 25-foot test, a 50-foot test, holding up a sign, and you could read it at 50 feet on the Reolink camera better than you could on any other camera. We did it in the daytime and at nighttime. Same thing, same clarity for $50. It's like $55 on Amazon. The Reolink 410 or something like that. It's awesome.
That's awesome. So the Reolink, I actually went and visited the guys at Reolink when I was in China in May. Very nice guys, and I agree with you, Rob. They've got some great, interesting products coming out. So very cool. Well, you heard it here. You heard it first, ladies and gentlemen, the sneak preview to the hookup. Thank you, Rob. That was very generous. Well, Maria, I see we got a lot of comment and interaction out there.
We do.
And I'll tell you what, Rob, the audience has been biting at the bit to talk to you because we get home automation questions all the time. So let's go ahead and see what our audience has to ask.
So we have Peter Samuels joining us from New Jersey. Said it's noon in New Jersey time, since that's how we're doing it today.
Thank you, Peter, for correcting me. Yeah.
And he wants to know, I think you'll touch base a little bit on this already, but he wants to know, Rob, are you running VLANs for your segregation? And that it looks like you are doing similar paths to what he's doing.
So I have two VLANs and then the main network. One VLAN for the IoT stuff and one for what I'm calling the NOT or Network of Things. Those are my local stuff. And then you'd think I would have a VLAN for cameras as well. But what I found out, and I took a little bit of digging, is that for whatever reason on the Ubiquiti USG, VLAN routing is not hardware offloaded. And so if you're routing a ton of data, like you would get if, let's say, you have 9 4K camera streams, right? That's a ton of data. And if you're routing all that across a VLAN, you start to see some lagging in the video because the main processor in a USG isn't super strong, isn't super powerful, but it has a lot of hardware offloading that it can do in order to sort of ease the strain on the processor. So what I figured out is a much better idea is I've got a VLAN for IoT and a VLAN for NOT because those are just little packets. They're no big deal. But then I made a group of all my IP cameras by IP address, and I just segregate them on the main network, but by their IP address. And I've got firewall rules to say, hey, these guys don't need to talk to anybody. Any outbound traffic from them gets blocked. They're allowed to use port 123 to do some NTP time sync stuff, but I found a massive performance upgrade from taking them off of a VLAN and putting them back on my network, my main untagged VLAN, and then just segregating them as a group, as an IP group.
Wow, that's a serious insight there, Rob. Wow, guys. I hope you guys are writing this stuff down because this is, you'd probably be paying some consultant quite a bit of money to get that kind of information about that little detail. So very interesting, very interesting.
We have a question from Tom.
Hey, Tom, welcome to the show.
Yes, one of our loyal subscribers and watchers. He wants to know, he has a Wise Cam, which he uses a cloud. Should he be worried?
Is it inside? I would not ever put a cloud serviced camera inside my house. I'm a little bit tinfoil hat wearing, so take everything with a grain of salt. But you should be aware that anything that is a cloud service is running not on your secure network. And so anybody who has bad intentions, whether it's somebody in Wise the company or somebody who has hacked Wise, they could have access to whatever that camera is looking at inside your house. And there's some interesting little things that are done where you can set up like privacy areas and things like that where it'll block off part of the camera stream. But that's all done in software. So that's not really it's not really a solution to that. I will say this though, I know that Wise does have RTSP in their. I know it was a beta firmware not too long ago, but I haven't heard whether or not they're going to merge it with the main firmware. But you can download a custom firmware for Wise stuff that's from Wise, and you can set it as an RTSP camera, and then you can have it only be local. So if you do have some Wise cameras that are outside and you want to keep the cloud for that, that's fine. What's the big deal about somebody looking outside your house? But for me, there's a real privacy issue with having cameras inside the house, and any camera that's inside the house, I think, should absolutely off from the cloud without any question.
That's great feedback. Hey, Tom, what are you looking at? Let us know. Are you looking in the house? Are you looking outside the house? And for the rest of you guys out there, give us your opinion. Weigh in on this. Rob has really proposed an idea that cloud-based storage of internal cameras is a dangerous thing. We want to hear what you guys think. Are you using a lot of cameras looking inside, or are most of these cameras looking outside? So let us know what you guys are thinking about.
I think Tom might be using them inside. He hasn't confirmed, but he said he has a pretty boring life, so they'd be disappointed. He said then he doesn't do too much; they'd be bored. But he said he has played a little bit with RTSP, as Rob mentioned.
Very cool, Rob. RTSP. What that? Can you give us a little bit more definition what RTSP means?
Sure. I mean, I don't. It's remote something streaming protocol. I don't.
Yeah, we use
what the
RTSP for streaming the video up to like Facebook and YouTube. So I'm curious about that.
But basically, it's a protocol just like HTTP or TCP or any of those things, right? But the key to RTSP is essentially the camera runs its own little video server that runs on the device, right? And then if you connect to RTSP, right, you're just reading that data directly off the camera rather than having to have the camera send data somewhere. The camera really doesn't even care that there are clients connected to it. It doesn't care which client is connected to it. It might know how many are connected total, but it's going to run that stream no matter what. Even if there's nothing looking at it, there's a video stream being generated there so that when you do connect up to it via NVR, or you can even use like VLC Media Player to do RTSP stream reads, you're just looking at what is already there on the camera.
Very cool, guys. I tell you what, man, you're getting an education. I'm learning a ton. Sorry, Rob, you're going to say something. Yeah.
So there's a bunch of different codecs used, obviously, for RTSP, but the two most common ones are H.264 and H.265. And H.264 is has always been the standard for years now, as far as compression for video, and that's like what YouTube uses for video compression and stuff like that. But H.265 is even better, and it's like, basically you keep the same image quality and you half the file size. The problem with it is that it's not fully supported by all the NVRs yet. So a lot of times if you're using like direct-to-disk recording or something like that in your NVR, it'll only support H.264. Or if you want to stream it to a Chromecast or something like that, they only support H.264 at this point. So you might need to go in and use the worse stream, the H.264 stream, instead of the H.265 stream, just so it's compatible with all your devices. But as anything in technology goes, you just got to wait. It'll get better.
It's going to get
better. Everything will get caught up.
And we have a comment from Peter. He said he totally agreed with you, Rob, that free cloud is vulnerable. And he said, in his opinion, if you purchase some secure cloud space, that you're better off. Would you say you agree with that?
Sure,
Peter. Real quick, Peter, where are you paying for it, and what do you feel is secure? Sorry, Rob. Go ahead. I wanted to ask Peter that question.
No, that's great. That's exactly what I was going to ask. Is what is secure cloud space? I've been quoted as saying a bunch of times, I really don't like cloud-based services. But that being said, I do use Amazon devices and I use Google devices, but almost strictly those two. And the reason for that is that Amazon and Google are huge companies, and the people that they employ are incredibly talented, and they, for better or for worse, they are keeping your data safe because they want to avoid bad press. It would take very little for somebody to say, "Hey, Amazon just leaked all your data," and their stock prices would plummet, right? So they're spending a lot of time and a lot of money making sure that your data is secure. Sure, they're using it, and we can talk forever about whether that's ethical,
good or bad,
right? But they are keeping it safe, and I absolutely trust companies like Amazon or Google more than I trust a small company. That's not to say that I trust them 100%, but with the network engineers and coders that they can employ, I believe that the data is more secure on those networks than it is, just on some small startup.
Okay, very cool.
And I didn't want to brush over. We have Jorge from Top Edge Video joining from Orlando, Florida.
Hey, Jorge,
Hi, Jorge.
welcome,
Send
buddy.
us your questions later on. We do have another question from Tom, though. He said, Rob, do any of your videos that you have on your YouTube show how to set up a VLAN?
So I'm on part 1 of my network setup. 2 comes out tomorrow. And then part 3, which is VLANs, comes out on the 3rd. So tomorrow's video is, yes, it's a 3-parter. I tried to do parts 2 and 3 together, but the script came out as like 9 pages, and I plugged that into some, word to video length calculator or word to speech length calculator, and it told me it was going to be 45 minutes. So I decided not to do that to myself. And so the VLAN one is going to come out on the 3rd of July, rather. But the one tomorrow is going to include setting up separate SSIDs for the different device types. So, having an IoT SSID, having an NOT SSID, having your main unrestricted SSID.
Well, and I'll give you a tip, Tom. Another YouTuber who's doing great videos talking about Ubiquiti, especially in particular if you're using Ubiquiti, is Chris from Crosstalk Solutions. I watch his stuff all the time. He does a great job with the network technology, so I really enjoy him. So give that a check. Crosstalk Solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Crosstalk
Chris?
Is fantastic. Yeah, oh yeah. And so actually the reason that I made one of my hardware choices, I chose to get a USG for my router instead of a Edge router Lite, which Chris uses. The reason that I chose that I think Chris has already done a great job showing how to use the Edge Max interface for setting up VLANs and for doing all that. And I didn't want to make duplicate content, essentially. So there's a pretty big lack of how to do those advanced networking things on the USG as far as video content goes. And so I chose the USG just so I could make those types of videos available.
Fantastic. So thank you, Chris. Shout out to our guy, Chris at Crosstalk Solutions. All
He
right,
is
what
fantastic.
do we got? He is great. We're getting great input. I really appreciate our audience. We have a great audience, and Rob, you've been a great guest. What do we have?
Peter let us know about some of that secured cloud he uses. He says AWS ham segregated space that's for purchase, specifically the same space that banks and financial institutions use. Hopefully very secure.
Peter, that was a great suggestion.
I'm assuming that he means AWS has segregated spaces.
Oh, probably. I didn't catch that. I just read it as ham. I haven't finished my coffee.
So Amazon Web Services, runs the internet essentially. You can't go to a website without getting AWS. And I agree, it is absolutely a secure protocol. Now, if you are contracting with AWS specifically, like you say, I'm buying this from you, and then you are doing all the protocol stuff, I agree that's 100% secure. I will say though that other companies like Tuyo that we talked about that makes like this stuff, right? Oh, you can't even see that.
Yeah, your color keying
is coming off. My green screen's getting the best of me here. But Tuya uses AWS in the United States, and so certainly that's very secure. Except for on the other end, they are securely sending your data to someone. You got to know the protocol is good, but where is it going after that? Like you're using AWS services, and again, if you're just storing directly to AWS, that's totally secure. But in the case of Tuya, they're using AWS, which means that it's not likely to get intercepted along the way, but they're still sending it somewhere. They're storing it somewhere. Who is their end user on the other end? You're the purchaser, but maybe the company that sold you it in the first place. I'm trying to think of a brand here that I use a lot. uh, Smart Life or Martin Jerry is a good one, right? So let's say you buy a Martin Jerry switch. It uses Tuya. It uses AWS to send your information to their cloud, but then they're just going to relay it on to Martin Jerry. And what's Martin Jerry doing with it on their end? Who knows?
Well,
They're printing it out,
like
leaving it on their desk.
Looks like we have a viewer who agrees. It's Adalberto Esteves. Welcome to the show. He said, "Cloud is cloud. If you're not holding the data, then you are vulnerable."
that is interesting. Well, and so Rob, in general, it sounds like this home network is kind of an essential part. And maybe we could ask and spark some conversations for those of you guys out there watching. One of the big things I'm curious about, and I struggle with, is Rob. Is how do you build that home network with PoE at home so you can have that? You've done the whole project. Obviously, you're still filming the parts. Can you give us some lessons learned? And I want lessons learned from the audience too. Any lessons learned about adding a network, a wired network with PoE to your home that you would share with everyone?
So I think the thing about PoE that makes it so important and makes it so nice is that it's a lot more accessible than running a new 110 volt line, or if you're overseas, a new 220 line. That's terrifying. If you need to have power in a specific place in your house, do you really want to go and start messing around with junction boxes and wiring in a new line? In some countries, that's even illegal to do that. But it is not illegal to plug in an Ethernet cord on one side and then run that patch cable to somewhere else and plug it into the other side. So if you are in like Australia or something like that, right, where they heavily regulate who can do electrical work, and you have a PoE switch, you are allowed to run an Ethernet cable from your PoE switch to whatever device it is, wherever it is, and you are not breaking the law by doing that. You're allowed to have that line get run, and so not only does that solve a problem that a lot of people have where they don't want to mess with mains voltage, and I agree with that. If you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't do it. You can die. Like that sounds like I'm overreacting or something like that, but no, you can actually die. It will kill you if you do it wrong. And so if you don't feel comfortable with something, you shouldn't do it. Just like if you don't feel comfortable with standing up on a ladder, you shouldn't do it. Don't let a YouTube video or the internet say that you'll be fine, because if you don't feel comfortable with it, you ultimately shouldn't do it. And so what PoE does is it gives you a nice, great connector on both ends. You can just plug your RJ45 connector in and be done with it, right?
Man, I wish I had that on video. Oh, wait, I do have it on video. That's awesome, Rob. Thank you.
It gets rid of all the soldering nonsense and having to deal with what gauge wire should I use for this? How many amps am I going to be running? Am I going to be overloading a circuit that's already in my house? Do I have to worry about messing up a GFCI connection in my house? If I have something as the very first junction on that box, but everything else was the GFCI, am I going to retain that GFCI on that circuit? Yeah, it's just simple, right? You just plug the cord in, you run it to a different place, and then you plug it in on the other side.
Well, one thing that, well, Rob, I was going to point out, and this is a lesson learned that I think it's worth discussing, because I read between the lines in your setup and what you're doing. A big lesson learned that I think most people have is if you're planning to implement Power over Ethernet or interior network, and I know Chris has had the biggest problem, is figuring out where to put your network equipment. Nobody, no architect that I know builds residential places with a server closet or server area. And there are different requirements. And so some things that I would put out there to think about as you're trying to figure out how to do your home network. And I noticed you actually ran into the problem where you've got two switches because you couldn't get them both in the same place.
Yeah, they did the drops wrong when they built the house.
Yeah, that's right. They did the drops wrong, and you had planned for doing it right, and they did it wrong. But by the way, congratulations on the new baby.
She's 6 now, but
Oh, okay. So this project has been in the works for a while.
yeah.
So what I would encourage people to do, and I would give two alternatives. One, find a good space to put the equipment. Some places you don't want to do is don't put it necessarily up in the top of a closet because you've got to have ventilation for your equipment. Anything that's running power over Ethernet or pretty hefty network equipment, it's going to require ventilation. And at the top of the closet, you're not going to get ventilation, even though it's a very convenient place. Number two, and I know Chris from Crosstalk Solutions talked about this before, and your feedback, Rob, is good. Don't put it in your bedroom or near your bedroom because it is network equipment. And while, on a noisy, busy day where everybody's talking, you're not going to hear the fan and equipment operating at night while you're trying to get sleep. You're going to hear that buzzing sound. You're going to hear that network equipment. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. You're the expert here, but
Unless you're into that.
unless you're into
I was
that.
gonna say it kind of be like a white noise.
I really
sound
like the white
machine.
noise. Yeah, we sleep. My wife and I sleep with a big fan that we've had for 14 years or something like that in the bedroom just to give us white noise. So I don't think
Oh,
network equipment would bother me.
there you go.
You might dream about it though, if you don't already.
Yeah.
So Rob, maybe some suggestions. I'm trying to think where would be the right place in a house, a normal house, that would make sense to put the network equipment. I think a linen closet very often does well if you've got a linen closet. Not far from your security system. A lot of places where if you have or had a centralized security system, that same area would be good. Or
So
go
So
ahead,
one of
Rob.
the areas that I have a lot of tech stuff is I have a Murphy bed, but any tall cabinet or something would be fine as well. And the thing about that is it just happens to have an AC duct, an AC register right blowing on top of it. I mean, it almost blows directly onto the top of this Murphy bed. And so I just, it's probably 96 inches off the ground at least. And so then, I've got crown molding on the side of it, and I just kind of pile everything on the top, and it gets a nice AC flow over it, and nobody ever sees it. If I want to do something with it, I just go grab a chair and stand on a chair, and fine. Um, uh, but it's out of the way completely. You can't see it. It gets cooled. It's because it's open air as well. It's not like your closet where you're closing the door. It's in a whole room. Now that it is a Murphy bed, so when the guests come, they are going to have to deal with the fan noise. But again, I don't think that's the end of the world. In fact, when I go to somebody else's house, I like it when there's a little bit of fan noise. But again,
That's a good point. So, lessons learned: get some fan noise. What do we have, Maria? So, where people?
So Peter chimed in with where he likes to put some of the network equipment. He said basement crawl space or maybe even a garage seems to work, and they tend to be cooler. So that ventilation you were mentioning.
Yeah, Peter,
so
you're up north
basement
though,
for
right?
sure.
Yep, New Jersey.
Yeah, a basement is great because they stay cool all the time. A garage, especially not in Florida, I would not put network equipment in a garage.
Garages here get pretty
I can,
hot.
yeah, if I have a little temperature and humidity sensor out in my garage right now, actually, let's see. I'm sure it's absurd.
Yeah, you're in Florida, my friend. It's like here in Texas. We'll get up to 130 degrees in some spaces.
It is 124 Fahrenheit in my garage right now, and 87% humidity.
Ridiculous.
So that's probably good, right?
Ooh, yeah, that's not healthy, but that is a good tip for people. If you're at a certain location, yeah, you probably don't want to get in the garage. But when you're far enough north, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think you probably, if anybody's joining us from Alaska or Canada, obviously you want to avoid freezing the equipment, and garages can get cold. But that's some great tips, Peter. Thank you for that suggestion.
And we have a couple people chiming
know what
in
the-
regarding
you know-
the safety of PoE.
You know what the lower bounds is on the equipment operating temperatures?
Typically, our equipment runs down to about 10 degrees C. So 10 degrees C or right at freezing. They don't like to go freezing. I think because at the freezing point, well, and it has to do with the dew point too. You don't want to have it above the dew point, but right around freezing, the problem is water will crystallize on the circuits themselves. So you have to have a watertight enclosure once you go below freezing.
Right. No, that makes sense to me. But I was just thinking to myself that, like, I know my Unify equipment runs crazy hot. You could probably use it as a heater in your garage if you wanted.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and they designed them to work up to about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really important because if you're putting your Ubiquiti equipment in a 130 degree Fahrenheit environment or 120 degrees, you got to have a lot of volume of air blowing over that equipment so it doesn't get internally up to 140 degrees, at which point components start to fail. So that's another thing to think about. If you're thinking about putting some equipment up into your attic, you need to think about what temperature that attic gets to, and it's typically 10 to 20 degrees above ambient. So if you're in a space, if you're in a place that routinely gets into the 90s and the hundreds, your attic space could get hotter, and you'll want to pick equipment. Look at that temperature range on your equipment so that you don't go over, because otherwise you're going to get intermittent. This is the hard part too. Is you're not gonna. It's not like one day a little thing's going to pop, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're done and it's over. You're gonna get run up with intermittent failures and some interesting things happening for a while. You'll be trying to figure it out until you really just end up cooking the equipment.
That's one thing that I haven't researched yet. I was surprised to see that nowhere on the Unify controller is there temperature readings. You can't, it's not, on your dashboard or anything, but it seems like that would be a great thing to say, hey, your switch is 140 right now. Consider relocating it. I mean, it tells you things like you've got high Wi-Fi interference, consider changing the channel. So why doesn't it say consider relocating your switch because it's too hot? And I, like I said, I haven't researched whether or not it does any thermal throttling itself, or if it's just going to die. Right? Does it clock down before it goes into thermal failure?
I don't know about that. I know the Pis will clock down. You can set up a Raspberry Pi to clock down, but I don't know about Unify equipment. That's a great question. If you know out there, if you use Unify equipment and you know the answer to this really important question, chime in. Let us know.
It looks like Adalberto wrote in. Oh, sorry. Adalberto is just saying that he agrees that he knows nothing about electrical wiring, but feels comfortable that PoE makes him feel comfortable enough that he's okay with that.
Very cool. Well, thank you for that. PoE in the right circumstances is the right tool. And I think I'm all about getting the right tool for the right application.
I've been using PoE in, various ways for a long time, not from a switch, but even before I had this PoE switch, I was using just balance, right? So you balance, unbalance, where you like plug in the power and the video, and then you send it over a twisted pair, and then on the other side you unbalance it again, which again it's sort of like PoE. It's just with a injector that's not 48 volts or 12 volts instead, but same type of thing. Passive though.
Yes. Well, I think the cool aspect about what PoE is doing now is that it is so ubiquitous in terms of the applications. It can do lighting, it can do home automation, it can do security cameras. And I would posit that it is an investment, and a fairly sound investment. Obviously, I'm biased, so take whatever I tell you with a grain of salt, because I got PoE on my name tag here. But it's an investment in the future of where technology is going, and I can tell you, when I do Invocom, I do CD, I do Bixby, more things are coming onto network devices. And what I mean by that, it's not just that things are becoming network devices, but new technologies and new information are better enabled on networks, whether they be wireless or wired. And obviously, sometimes a wireless network is better, and sometimes a wired network is better. So actually, I'd ask you, Rob, with all of your experience, where do you think the cutoff, that line is, that the line of to go with wireless devices and wireless communication versus wired communication?
Well, it should be wired wherever possible. That when you start getting into wireless stuff, not only is your signal strength going to be less and your reliability going to be less, but your security is a lot less too. Just based on some sort of artifacts of the 802.11 standard, it is stupid easy to knock a wireless device off the network. You don't need to have any internal access to the network. You can walk around with a $10 device, walk around your neighborhood, put it on a little battery, and it'll pop up SSIDs, and you just can select them and go, and it'll take everything off that SSID. It'll knock everything offline. They're called wireless deauthors, and they send, basically what they do is there's a little packet, so if you go onto your Unify controller or something like that, you'll notice that there's an option for all your wireless devices to restart them, right? You can hit restart, and what it does is or I guess it says reconnect. And so what it does is it sends out a packet to that device and says, hey, we'd like you to disconnect from the network, and then that device disconnects, and then it goes into whatever state it would in a disconnected, which is pretty much always going to be try to reconnect, right? And so then it'll reconnect to the network, which is great. Except for the fact that you don't need to be authenticated on that network to send a deauth packet. So you can go around and just select SSID and hit take everything off this SSID, and it'll just go and start blasting that SSID with deauth packets, and everything will go down. Everything will try to reconnect, right? And you can use this in really, really bad ways, right? So the number one way, and sort of the reason why this got into be mainstream, was that then you can have a rogue access point where you can say, hey, I'm going to spew deauth packets, and then I'm going to blast the same SSID, right? And I'm going to blast it with a much, much higher signal. And so then when everything reconnects, they're not going to reconnect to their home network, to the network that they were on before. They're going to reconnect to you, right? And so these devices, like the Wi-Fi Pineapple is the super famous one, but there's hundreds of them. These devices can then intercept all of your traffic, and if you have unencrypted traffic, then that unencrypted traffic, like if you have an MQTT broker or something like that, that local network, that NOT network that I have, you can find the SSID and the password for that network to have e-access. So you could theoretically then use that to pivot onto my other networks, to pivot onto that very what's the word I'm looking for? The unrestricted access network. And so that's one of the reasons why when you have different SSIDs, it's really important to have different Wi-Fi passwords on all of them, so that if somebody gets one of your Wi-Fi passwords for one of your SSIDs, that doesn't do them any good. If you get onto my NOT network, you can communicate with my MQTT broker. What's that going to do for you? Not a whole lot, right? And then all my other stuff stays safe. But and so when we talk about something like the WiseCam, that's again one of my biggest issues with the WiseCam is it's Wi-Fi. And so if you are doing all of your recording up to the cloud, and you knock off the Wi-Fi, you're done. It's not recording anymore. Now WiseCams do come with an SD card on them, I believe, for this very purpose, and that is that they will record onto the SD card until they can get their Wi-Fi connection back, and then they'll send up that to the internet. But some notable exceptions of things that don't do that are the Blink cameras that Amazon owns. They have very little internal storage, and so they're only storing, maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes or 10 minutes of video on that internal card before they upload it to the cloud.
Wow.
And so
that's
if
really
you keep them
interesting.
offline, if you keep them offline for 20 minutes with a deauthor, then you can get in and get out, and they're not going to have any record of you because it was offline that whole time.
Wow. So you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Make everything PoE. It just makes it simpler. No, that is really good input, Rob. What do you guys think? What are you guys out there thinking about this? And where would you draw the line between wireless and wired automation? Let us know. Hit the chat lines. While we ask Rob, so we talked about your project, and by the way, that you did a video not too long ago with a hacker that you knew who's willing to sit down and chat with you about it. I'm assuming some of these lessons learned came from that conversation.
I also, so I'm a high school teacher. That's my main job, and I run the white hat hacking team at my school as well. And we have a few mentors from the Air Force down here at in Tampa. We have MacDill Air Force Base, which is the Special Forces hub, or Special Forces is where they have the main Special Forces. I don't know what they call it, hub. But that's where they run all the stuff for the Special Forces. Anyways, we have some mentors that come from that Special Forces cybersecurity division and come mentor my kids in basically current issues in cybersecurity, and I learn a ton from that. Just listening to those guys talking about what they're doing on a daily basis, what you should watch out for. Teaching my kids some stuff about red teaming, and it's super interesting.
That is very interesting. Well, what did everybody come back with now?
We have a question from Peter. So
Hey, Peter.
He wants to know what you think of the Hikvision cameras, specifically 6 to 8 megapixel.
Yeah, so Hikvision cameras are certainly like the de facto standard in PoE IP cameras. I agree with that. I tested one. It was in my test, and it performed really well. But I would say it performed on level with the Reolink camera, and I paid $130 for the Hikvision, and I paid $50 for the Reolink. So
that's
you can do better.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Very cool. And Peter had something else.
Yes, he said he does exactly the same thing, I think, regarding the difference between having devices on Wi-Fi versus IoT. He goes for the same reasons: Wi-Fi for only IoT and phone, and then separate VLANs for both.
All right, there you go, guys. It sounds like we're getting a pretty good consensus.
And then he also said, I think regarding
the problem with
cameras. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if we start seeing that coming out in like your Google Wi-Fi and your Eero stuff and all those mesh sort of consumer grade things as an option. If they start seeing that it's why people are migrating off of their platform, because they could very easily do it. It would be so easy for them to set up in their app for you to just tag devices and say, I want this to be, or this is an IoT device. Or even better is if they could just have a, sort of a database and say, look, I see that that you're connecting an Amazon Echo device to your network. Would you like to block it from the rest of your network? I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think from a consumer grade product that would make a huge difference in public opinion of those products if you could do things like that.
That's very cool. That's a feature we should be looking into. Well, any questions we should hit?
I have one.
Yeah,
on
go
the
for it,
topic
Marie.
of the Google Wi-Fi. That made your top
Sure.
5 list in a video you released last year for the top 5 must-haves. Is that still on your list, or has that top 5 changed at all since that video release?
Okay, so I could touch on this a little bit in my last video, and that is, if you want to plug in a device and have it work, right? If you want to have a strong network and you have a decently large house, let's say 2,500 square foot house, and you just want solid Wi-Fi coverage throughout, and you want decent security, Google Wi-Fi is hard to beat. I mean, it's $250 for the 3-pack, and you plug it in to the power. It doesn't have PoE, but you plug it into the power and you plug it into Ethernet.
We can take care of that for you.
We
can take care of that for you, just so you know. But go ahead. You're saying you plug it in.
And then you put them around your house, right? In my house, I had mine with a wired backhaul for all the access points, and I think that really helped.
I was going to bring that up.
But I mean, the coverage was great, and I mentioned in my security video a while back that one of the biggest security vulnerabilities, or one of the biggest reasons that your network becomes vulnerable, is if you aren't doing your firmware backups or your firmware updates, rather. And most people have never logged into their router and clicked update firmware. That's just not something that's on people's radar most of the time. Google Wi-Fi doesn't even ask you; it just does it.
Does it?
Right?
Yeah.
So you don't need to say to update the firmware. Google Wi-Fi just says, oh, there was a security vulnerability. We need to patch the vulnerability. Let's push it out to every Google Wi-Fi in the entire world, and then it happens that night. And so that's no longer a vulnerability. And that's both scary and great at the same time. Scary in the sense that somebody somewhere has a button where they can, change the firmware on the devices in your house without you knowing or agreeing to it, right? But also good because most people don't want to have to worry about that. And so if it just happens automatically, that's probably good.
Very cool.
And so that's still in your top 5. I think you had Google Wi-Fi, automated blinds, door sensors, which you also had on a gate, RTSP and VR, and a Home Assistant, or the Home Assistant app. Would you say those are still solid top 5 choices?
No, I think those are pretty good. Those are really high on my list, and those are a lot to do with security. But the great part about them is that when you're automating, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in some people between the term automation and the term smart home. And they are a little bit different, right? So a smart home is something where you can talk to your Echo device and say, hey, do this or do that or whatever, right? And then an automation is something that happens without your input. It knows what you want. So in my case, this would be like, when the device, my wife and I have device trackers on our phones, right? And when we leave the house, it arms the security system, right? It shuts the blinds in the house because not only does that save on AC in the Florida sun, but then you don't have to worry about people peeping in, right? And it changes the profile on my cameras, right? And normally the profile on my cameras just records on motion, but then it also changes to a different profile in Blue Iris where it will alert on motion on specific cameras, right? So I don't want to alert on motion at the one that can see the street because then I don't want to know about every car that's driving by. But I have one on my patio, and I definitely want to know about somebody on my patio. But I don't want to know about it when I'm home because it's just my daughter or my wife or me, right? So by having all those things connected in Home Assistant, you can say this home automation device or this smart home device that I have over here can interface with this security device over here to provide that thing that we call home automation, which is not having to worry about the stuff and it just happening.
That is very cool. That's a good perspective to hear the difference between home automation and smart homes. They're not the same, and they behave differently, and I think that's a very good point. Rob, can I ask a question for you? And disclaimer, everybody, this is a loaded question. Are you still using Raspberry Pi for your server, or have you migrated away from that?
I have migrated away. I have a Plex server in my house that is a big beastie Dell Optiplex.
Mm-hmm.
And so that server really runs everything now. I've got separate VMs for Home Assistant and my Plex server and now Blue Iris are all running on that Optiplex.
Okay. Well, the loaded question then, and this is the product placement that makes this show possible. So I will shamelessly, I'll shamelessly put it out there. Is we're proud to announce for the audience out there that we've produced our own Raspberry Pi hat that does the PoE conversion. Now, before you guys all ask why would I do that when Raspberry Pi does their own, Three reasons. Number one, we wanted to make something that because we know PoE. This is what we do. This is what we know. We made a product that we knew would be a lot more stable. And here's the important two key design features that are really important. Number one, it is optically isolated. So the PoE coming in is optically isolated from the Pi. And that's really important, especially when you're using the HDMI port or you're doing any kind of connected devices to this. It is a much safer way to do it. We've had a lot of experiences with our products where people were charging Raspberry Pis or other kinds of things as servers for displays, and the displays were burning out. Very expensive changes. So we updated our boards years ago to optically isolated devices, and while we were doing it, we improved our efficiency. And I did a stress test on this Pi with our hat on it without a heatsink, even though we do leave room in the board for a heatsink, and it never even got warm. I was really impressed. It ran hard and long without getting too hot. So we figured this would be a good time to announce it to everybody. The Pi hat is coming out in July from PoE Texas. You'll find it on Amazon and our store. So I've done my product placement. Thank you all for being patient while I did that. But if you have questions, reach out to us. We're happy to talk about what we're doing with this Pi hat.
Yes, always.
I have a
Always on the
question.
questions.
Yeah, Rob. On that Pi hat, that one looks like it's attached to a Pi, right?
Yeah, it is actually mounted
So
onto the
where's hat
pins.
part? Can we see it?
That is
Can you
the
pull
hat.
can you
So
pull the hat off?
yeah. The Raspberry Pi 3B Plus now actually has onboard magnetics. So this is the hat. Let me see if I can
Oh, that
get
looks
good
great.
contrast. And so what it's designed to be is very thin. The thickest part is this isolation transformer. And it comes with the mounting pins so that you just slide it onto the Pi, onto the pins that are on the Pi board, and you're off to the races. It is that simple.
Very
And
cool.
we try to make it small enough that it would fit into most case enclosures.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So
I have another question, another PoE
yeah.
question for you. So, one of my biggest problems that I don't know how to fix is what do you recommend for surge protection on PoE lines? Because
That is a great question.
from what I've seen, it's really easy and really cheap for me to go and buy a surge protector for 110 volt AC, right? It's $10 for a surge protector, not a good one, but
Mhm.
let's say $50 for a decent surge protector, right?
Yep.
But to surge protect a 16 port switch, PoE switch, I'm looking at what, $600-700, something like that.
Yeah.
How do you handle that, and when is it necessary and when is it not necessary, would you say?
That's a great question. And I think I know where you're coming from. You did that great show with the lights on your back patio, that storm hit and knocked out that whole lighting system. I
Right.
was aching for you, my friend. So surge protection really, in our experience, what I've seen with it is outdoors. Anything that's going outdoors that is a possibility of being struck by lightning, you want to do surge protection. And it is something very important. You do find surge protected power over Ethernet devices. So, for example, if you look at a couple of our product lines, they are surge protected specifically. You do need to be careful with surge protection, though, because so let me rephrase. Go back a step. You can buy products that are surge protected, like some of our switches are surge protected. Some of our injectors are surge protected. So that's built into the machine. And the value to that is, it works. We also can offer an off-board surge protector that's a separate device that will surge protect another device. I have heard people talk about issues with those surge protectors blocking some of the data traffic. So I'm going to encourage you to bench test, if you're buying a surge protector, to bench test it before you put it in. But you're absolutely right, Rob. A good surge protector for PoE can easily run you $50, $50 to $100. I mean, that's pretty easy to do.
For a single port.
For a single port, yeah. That's
Right.
just a single port. So
Yeah.
you do want to be considerate. From the price point, you want to be considerate what you're picking for surge protection. Items going outside, definitely consider surge protection. But again, I would also suggest think about the application. I mean, sometimes the application, if it's not a mission critical application and you can put up with it being down for a day or two, or it's not that hard to replace, you may consider not doing the surge protection. But obviously, things that are mission critical, things that are difficult to replace or access, that $50 investment is worth doing.
I guess what I'm concerned with is uh, the fact that all of my network is connected together. And so let's say there was a lightning strike and one of my PoE cameras was close enough, doesn't necessarily have to get hit directly, but was close enough to get, let's say, 700 or 800 volts or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's going to stop 700 or 800 volts from coming back through that line, into my switch and then being distributed out through that switch into the rest of my equipment, right? So I guess it's not really surge protection that I'm interested in, it's surge arresting. I want something that's going to take it coming in and block it from distributing out.
Yes. Now, we've seen most of the time, 90% of the time, a lightning strike near a PoE camera will damage the camera, and it doesn't damage the network that it's based on. So
and that would be great. I'll replace a camera, no big deal.
Yeah, and so most of the time, even with surge protection, to what you're saying, Rob, is most of the time surge protection is about protecting the back end equipment in the server room. It's not about protecting the device. Frankly, anything you set outside, if it gets hit with lightning, there are very few things on Earth that will not be damaged or can even have a good chance of not being damaged by lightning. So that really is what you're talking about, is protecting a port. Most of our experience shows you're going to be okay with surge protection. You may lose a port on your switch if you're going to go with that. But yeah, it is an investment. I wish I had an easy answer for that. And that, you know what, you're throwing down the gauntlet. I need to invest in that because I think you're right. A lot of home users are putting cameras outside, and that's a big investment to see your Unify system just burn up because of one lightning strike and losing one camera. And that is a big investment, taking the like you said, $600-700 for surge protection.
And if
Peter says to use
if
a
it's
UPS.
true, UPSs are good for the incoming 110 lines, the mains lines, but I guess some of them do have some Ethernet isolation in them. I think my Cyber Power one over here has a single Ethernet in and then out. Although I don't know what that would do to a PoE, if it would like that at all.
I don't know. Well, the other thing that I would point out is to consider making sure you're using grounded cables. So another way that protects you is grounding. It's not the same as surge protection, but it adds a little bit of extra grounding. But the trick is you have to know how to ground properly, and you have to ground. You have to make sure you don't ground both ends, causing noise on your line. But you have to have grounded connectors that connect them. And not a lot of people know that. You find people ask us all the time, is this device grounded? And I'll show you something here that's really important. This port on our device, if you can see it's silver on the edge, it is by itself grounded. But if your network cable looks like this one, where you've got that nice plastic network cable, it is not grounded. And so it doesn't matter if you have a grounded port on your device. If you don't have a grounded network cable, that grounding really isn't going to do much for you. And then you also have to know where to ground. And so you guys know out there, always ground on one end. Don't ground both ends. Like some people think, when you're grounding, more grounding, if some grounding is good, more grounding is better. Actually grounding two ends of a shielded cable actually induces electricity onto that shielding and will cause noise. So when you're grounding, you pick a single grounding point, make sure it's a good grounding point, but only ground one point. So, it's an interesting question. A lot of people ask, are your mid-spans grounded? And very often we have to explain they're grounded through to the switch, because usually you want to ground at the switch, not at your mid-span, and not at your PoE splitter. So that's a little quick note there, guys. Only ground one time. So sorry, I'm going off on something. Grounding is a big issue.
Actually, I think that's a really good point too. But that we're about lightning is you need to ground on your switch side, because if you ground the further away that you ground, when lightning strikes, ground can actually induce voltage if it's saturated. If there's a lightning strike close by, right? Let's say lightning actually strikes the ground, like the dirt, right? Anything that is grounded to that is not going to get 10,000 volts or 100,000 volts, but can get 40 or 50 just as that electricity sort of dissipates out. One of the things that we saw when my it's unclear exactly where the lightning struck, but certainly some feeders got out and hit our aluminum pool cage, right? And one of the things that happened after that was that one of the big palm trees in our backyard fell down about 3 days later. And the reason for that was that the electricity that went into the ground essentially boiled all the water in the ground in those roots and killed off the entire root system of that palm tree, and then it fell down, like I said, 3 days later.
Wow.
Which when you think about grounding, you're like, okay, that means I'm safe. Once it's in ground, it's gone. But it's still got to go someplace. It's still got to dissipate, right? And so if it dissipates into another ground that you were trying to prevent electricity from going into it, it can actually do the opposite. So you want to ground, inside, not outside.
Inside. That's a good point. What do we got, Maria? People are asking good comments, and I want to make sure
we have a question, I think, about the Pi hat. So Peter wants to know if we're going to make a hat for the Arduino.
Ooh.
I guess that means we're not sure yet, Peter.
No, actually, it means yes, we are. That is a great question, Peter. That is on the design track. We want to do a Pi hat or an Arduino hat. And the key here with the Arduino hat that and so send me feedback, comment on this. What's great about the Arduino is you can get power to it. That's easy enough to do. We're trying to figure out how much and what kind of power you want out to be able to control it, because you never use an Arduino like a Raspberry Pi. You just use to run the Pi. With an Arduino, you always want to do something with that power. So what would you guys like? Do you want just 24 volts DC on a relay? Do you need a variety of voltage out? Having it relayed or controlled right off the Arduino, is that important? So yeah, that is
you want 12.
12 volts.
Yeah.
All right, we can do 12 volts. We can output 12 volts on a relay.
That would be amazing. If that would be a huge product. If there was a hat that could take a Arduino compatible chip and PoE it, and then also be able to not just power it but use the Ethernet connection. So have a library for the Arduino ETH library, so that you could actually use that as the connection, right?
Yep.
And then also supply 12 volts. That would it's mind blowing right there.
Yep, that is already on the design path, Peter. Thank you for suggesting it, and thank you, Rob, for the 12 volts. We will make it 12 volts for you guys, and yeah, that's the whole idea, is that it would be something you could just come into and use a TCP/IP connection to communicate with it. Yeah, that's definitely on the path. What else do we have?
Very cool.
Not to ignore the Facebook watchers, we have Dave Edwards watching from SoCal, just north of LA.
Hey, Dave, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, we got feedback from Peter. So input is more critical to him rather than the output on the relay. He'll be running sensors and triggering additional relay controls.
So we're thinking about building it off of the Arduino Mini. So we're thinking about actually doing something where you could just take an Arduino Mini and just press it onto a board that would have a network port. So obviously we'd keep all the I/O on there, analog and digital. So that's good to know. You want to run sensors. Fantastic. And the reason why we were doing this, and I was asking Rob about this, we want to create kind of an open source platform that you could build off of and do all kinds of things. So if you could just do PoE in, what would you do with power out? What would you do with the data in? And kind of get it as an open source product where it'd be a platform. So I'm excited about that. And I think go ahead.
Does the Mini have micro USB on it for programming, or is it FTDI adapter only?
It's got a Mini on it.
Does it?
Yep.
Maybe I'm thinking about the Pro Mini. One of them doesn't.
Maybe I'm thinking about the wrong one. I thought it was. Is it the micro?
I would
You get
not
those.
know that one.
There are a lot of Arduinos out there. It might be the the Arduino Micro.
Yeah, looks like Peter's also inquiring about the Arduino.
Yeah, the Mini is
Leonardo?
the one that doesn't have it. Are you thinking about the Nano?
The Nano. I apologize. Here
Oh,
I
yeah.
am on live stream television, and I'm getting it wrong.
Can't
the
be edited out.
You're
Can't
right.
be
Yeah, it
edited
is.
out.
Thank you, Rob. The expert has saved me. The Leonardo.
Yeah, the Nano is great.
Go ahead, Rob.
The Nano is great because it's super cheap too. There's tons of knockoffs of it. You can procure a Nano for like $1, versus the Mini. You're always going to pay like $8 or $9 for a Mini.
Mm-hmm.
Still not breaking the bank at $9.
Yeah. Well,
definitely not.
the hard part for us. So the interesting thing is to build something that is cost effective for $50 or $100. No problem. I could build this all day, every day. But the trick is knowing the Arduino price point. And this is what makes it more complicated, is building something that is, relatively speaking, you can have something with a relative price point, and that's going to be a challenge.
Definitely.
Well, guys, we are well over our hour right now, and we have taken up a lot of Rob's time. If you have any last minute questions for our expert, get them in. But this has been a phenomenal show, Rob. I have learned so much. I know our audience has learned so much.
Me too.
It has been an honor to have you on the show. Do we have any last comments or questions from the audience that we need to get up there?
It doesn't look like it. We did have a late viewer, Grayson Petty.
Hey,
joining
Grayson.
in.
How you doing, buddy?
Joined in right at the Home Assistant talk. So good to have you.
Well, Rob, any last suggestions or tips you want to give for our audience before we wrap it up?
No, just enjoy it. I mean, I think a lot of people freak out, when they get into home automation or they start a new product or project. They say, "Oh, well, I'm never going to be able to figure this out, so I'm just not going to do it." And I think the biggest thing to learn is just that you're never going to be able to learn it if you don't try it. So even if you get in there and it doesn't go the way that you planned, and even if it's a total failure, you're probably going to learn something from that failure. And even that, there is just a huge community of DIY smart home people out there who are so helpful, that'll answer your questions and help you along the way. And so if you want to get started on it, absolutely do that. Don't worry about experience or anything like that. Everybody will try to help you as much as they can.
Fantastic. And that is a great point. Just start with what you can do. Just start doing something today. Don't wait, and do it and see what you can accomplish.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob. We appreciate it. Everybody, let's wave out to Rob. Say thank you. He will have comments and available. Oh, and I will throw up real quick. I'll throw up here. This is Rob's Twitter. If you want to subscribe to him, subscribe on YouTube and
down below.
In the link down
channel.
below. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, Rob has been very generous with his time, but the way he supports all this work that he's doing with home automation, and we support it as well, is through Patreon. So consider going on to Patreon and supporting Rob, subscribing to the Hookup, and we really appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Rob. All right. So, thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to wrap up the show with a reminder. We're going to be back here on YouTube and Facebook July 2nd with Jason Johnson from Ham 2.0. He's going to be talking to us about how ham radio operators are creating a mesh network across the country that we don't know about and how they're using PoE. So, Join us again July 2nd, 11 a.m. Central, right here. And join us next week. If you are an Amazon customer, we're going to go live on Amazon next Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 Central. We're going to be live on Amazon. We're going to be talking about our products, how to set them up, how to configure them, and offering some special deals. So join us then. We appreciate all of you coming out. Thank you very much. And we want you guys to have a great day. Oh, and I'm just going to jump us out here.